Chapter 34. With the air cleared, I resumed my friendship with Hosea. It was as if the 10 years had never happened. I must clarify this. Hosea and I adored each other. We were best friends. In high school, the love I felt for him was warm and comforting, like I imagined Sean's love should have been for me, safe and secure. Now, 10 years later, the warmth between Hosea and I was there, as strong as it had ever been. Since I slapped him in 6th grade, there was an electrical charge that added to the warmth every time we came near each other. We knew it was there, and we played with it, but never touched it. Some days the electrical charge ebbed, allowing us to revel in the warmth of our friendship. Other days that electrical charge was unbearable, and we wanted to rip each other's clothes off. On those days, we purposely played with it, daring to see who of the two of us would break first. We had yet to break. After 10 years, the electrical charge was mild, if not completely muted. We did not discuss sex. We did not discuss our wants or dreams. We spoke like friends. There was no flirting, no indecent exchange. But there was something new. A lot of things new between us. Things that wouldn't come out until much later. The most noticeable change was that there was a constant fear of abandonment, an incessant insecurity, a belief that if we didn't cling desperately to each other, we would lose each other again. We knew why we had lost each other, but in the end, after 10 years, we understood how easy it is to lose someone and how hard it is not to be able to find them when you want them. Hosea and I lived with the fear of losing each other for most of the rest of our lives. I clung to Hosea with an obsessive need, fueled by a severe fear of loss and abandonment. I'm sure Richard picked up on this. I'm sure my own fears fueled Richard's insecurities. Hosea and I knew if we met in person or spoke on the phone that the electrical charge would return. We both agreed not to exchange phone numbers or addresses because of this. It was a simple rule we lived by, and online there simply was no sexual attention. Online we were safe. I printed and handed every conversation exchanged between Hosea and I to Richard. He not only read every conversation, but I made them readily available to him without his asking. I would not lie and had nothing to hide. Richard's hunting trips had been given a financial hit that would threaten the last of my security. Bills were due and we had no money. The $2,000 hit from his hunting trip had taken its toll on us. Rent was overdue. We paid it at the expense of the cable and phone. Both services were shut off. I worked 2 jobs at this point. I was back at the bookstore and the children's store and working only 10 hours a week. But Richard was going mad. He was convinced I was leaving him and made it very clear how he felt. His worries erupted into frequent bouts of screaming, accusations, and petty nonsense. The abuse I experienced prior to finding Hosea tripled. I had nothing to think about, nothing to talk about. For me, there was nothing going on, nothing planned, nothing there between Hosea and I. Richard saw every exchange between us. There simply was nothing there to worry about. It all was in Richard's head. Everything changed the morning I woke up to find the internet access gone. The fear of loss and abandonment that sat in the background of my subconscious since November 21st awakened, and I panicked. I was terrified, convinced if I did not speak to Hosea, I would lose him all over again. I scrounged up what jewelry I could find, the emerald earrings my father gave me for graduation, some diamond-chipped necklaces and gold rings I had, and at 8 a.m. I told Richard what I was doing and walked to the nearest pawn shop. I needed $60 to pay for the internet and get it turned back on. I made the exchange and walked out of the shop with $67. For that 10-minute walk home, I was relieved until I got home to find the car gone and the house locked up. Richard and my children were gone. There was no note, no message, no nothing. My children were simply gone. I had no phone, no internet, no car. I walked to the library. They weren't there. I walked home, confirmed they were still gone, and walked in the opposite direction to an electronics store. I used the $67 to buy a prepaid phone, and I called Richard's mother. I haven't heard from him, she said. Can you call me, please, if you hear from him? I called my employer. I was supposed to be at work that afternoon. Hi, I can't make it in today because I don't know where my children are. I called the police and was told I couldn't do anything for 24 hours, so I sat in my cold, empty house and waited. Nothing slows time like waiting. I held myself and rocked and watched the clock tick by while I waited for the 24 hours to end. How far can you get in 24 hours? The silence was hell. Not knowing was worse. I thought of nothing else, not Hosea, not Richard, not my marriage. I only thought of my children. If they were safe, if Richard had truly flipped off the deep end and killed them, if they were healthy. I rocked and waited. I was a mother who had no idea where her children were. I would lose my job for calling off. I knew this. I didn't care. I listened to the bathroom faucet drip, counting down every slow minute while I pulled my hair out. I heard the car pull in. The car door slammed shut. I heard my children talking, and all my fears vanished as hope flooded me, and I toggled between shock, hope, and panic. The door opened and my children poured in with relief. Daniel, Anne, and Lynn. I collected my children, gathered them into my arms. I took them up and I sobbed. I hugged and kissed each one of them as the life in me returned. I touched their faces, hugged their heads to me, and cried into their hair. I gently herded them to their room, shaking as I released each one. I closed the bedroom door. The click cued my rage, and I turned with the red of a leviathan. Richard had no idea I was off my meds. He had no idea what he was walking into. What the fuck do you think you're doing? Taking my children from me! I shrieked. You were gone. I went to the pawn shop! I thought you were running off with Hosea, he said. I never! I screamed. You took my children from me! I did not, he said. No note, no message. I called your mother. We went to your father's. My brain exploded. Yes, he said. I needed someone to watch the kids so we could talk about this. Talk about my father? Yeah, my father doesn't love me, I screamed. My father hates me. Why the fuck would you ever think my father would help me? Well, I needed to talk to you so I could find... I told you I was going to the pawn shop. Yeah, you did, but I thought you lied and were leaving with Hosea. I don't lie. I've never lied. Not to you, not to anyone. You see every conversation we had. I'm hiding nothing from you. It doesn't matter. You're going to leave me. I screamed again, dropped down to the couch and rocked while I held myself. Well, he asked. I looked up like a rabid dog. What? Aren't you going to get ready? Where? I asked. You have work. I called off! Now he was pissed. You called off? We're hurting for money and you called off. You took my children, I said. I don't know where you were, when you would be back. If you'd be back, you'll lose your job. You don't take a mother's children. You don't do it. The argument continued well into the night and opened up an endless array of topics. Every argument and problem we ever had in 7 years came in like someone had opened the floodgates. The screaming dissipated hours later, leaving behind a stale exhaustion that left us both worn and confused. I lay in bed that night beside Richard, who slept soundly. I still hadn't spoken to Hosea. Hosea. I walked to the kitchen and pulled out a piece of paper. I drew a line down its center. At the top, I wrote pros and cons. In each column I wrote, leaving Richard and staying with Richard. And I began scribbling. 30 minutes later, I had exhausted all of my consequences. I stared at my choices before me and took a long, hard look at the lifestyle that the children would live. I knew the life of a divorced child. I knew the very wrong way to proceed with a divorce. I knew the errors my mother made when she went wrong and how. I examined what I, as a child of divorced parents, wanted and didn't want from a divorce. I knew what damaged me, what didn't, what should have happened between my parents. Above all else, the child must have stability. I also was raised in a screaming household. I knew what damage that does to a child. I knew the damage of a child being exposed to incessant fighting. Furthermore, I knew the character assassination between Richard and I was teaching my children all the wrong things about marriage. I had just seen 3 months of life without Richard. I knew exactly what life would be like without him. No screaming, no fighting. There was peace. I was calm. I was cool. I was quiet. I was happy during those 3 months. The tension in the house vanished overnight. With or without Hosea, I was happiest without Richard. It is more important for children to have their father or a happy home? That question was hard. Which was better for the children? At the bottom of the page, I wrote one line. To thine own self be true. And all at once I knew what I must do. Hosea or no, Richard had to go.